All right, welcome back. We're going to continue our exited series where we're talking to the members of the less than 7% of owners that go on and successfully exit their business so that we could learn the lived, learned lessons, which are oftentimes the most expensive and the most valuable. And today we have with us Jonathan Jacobs, Bootstrapped to Billions. Jonathan, welcome to the pod.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
Awesome. So we're going to kick this thing off. This is going to be a lived, learned episode where we're going to extract a lot of valuable information. But just to read in the audience quickly, in terms of the depth and breadth of experience, you're coming from the agency world. You kicked off Digital Natives Group in 2011. You went on and you exited in 2021. So a full decade running and building and growing this business, which was a healthy business, a seven-figure agency model, 20 to 30 clients that you were servicing with pride and success. And then you got to this moment in time where you experienced the exit, and you exited to Accelerate 360, who you went on and you joined as VP of Digital Marketing. Post-exit, which there's, I'm sure, a story around, and then everything in the middle. So we have 10 years to cover in today's episode, including also what it is that you're doing today in this secondary, every exit is also a new beginning journey. So kicking things off, taking us back to 2011, which, yes, is a very long time ago. I can remember it very fondly as well. And bootstrapping. Did you guys start as bootstrappers? How did you identify the problem that you were solving? How did you get into this space? Give us the true moment in time. Everything started somewhere. Where did things start for you?
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, thank you for having me on. I appreciate this opportunity to share the story, and I'm always happy to do it for the chance that it will help inspire someone else, reassure someone else, teach someone else something. So hopefully those of you listening can take something away from today's dialogue. So where did Digital Natives Group start? My business, there were four partners, which also our cardinal sin was that we had four partners. But there was myself, there were two guys I grew up with, and then one guy who one of them went to college. We had always talked, one of these friends from growing up and I, about the possibility of starting a business together. We had kind of joked. We had done a lot of business classes in high school. We were fortunate that our high school had a business department, which is at least then was a fairly rare thing. I don't know what it's like in high schools today. And we had kind of joked about it. We're graduating college in the summer or the spring of 2011. And I was striking out on the job hunt. I was really lazy about putting applications out there. The applications I was putting out there, which were still probably over 100, were all types of diverse opportunities. I was really slow to get started. And what I started to kind of realize is because it was none of these jobs were speaking to me. I liked 25% of them, or I liked the opportunity but not the company, or the company but not the opportunity. And for me, I started to piece together, they're not right for me because none of these roles are not right for me and these companies are not right for me, and it means I need to kind of start my own thing. If I take an opportunity, because I did end up getting a few offers, if I take a job that's not right for me, it's a disservice to myself, it's a disservice to the company, and it's a disservice to the person who's actually built for that role. Why should I take that job away from them? Why not make my own? And so eventually revisited the conversation I had with that friend from growing up, and we kind of just decided, why not take the leap and do it? He brought in his friend from college, we brought in another guy from growing up, and ultimately there were four of us. And in September of 2011, we kind of officially incorporated and started the journey.
All right, we want to take a quick break from today's pod to shout out our sponsor, Go HighLevel. I had the opportunity of hanging out with the founders a couple of weeks ago. They're really cool guys, but they're building an even cooler platform. Platforms and tools may help you do the work, but HighLevel helps you build the business. HighLevel is an AI-powered business operating system that serves as the foundation your business can run on. This is where your customers' conversations, workflows, and decisions all come together, and where AI actively moves things forward. It follows up automatically, prioritizes leads, books appointments, updates pipelines, and keeps everything in motion so you don't have to. You're not bouncing between systems or manually stitching together processes. You're building on a single operating layer. something that learns your business over time and helps you run it better. This isn't just a place to get work done. It's where you build a better business. If you're ready to build something smarter, start your 30-day free trial through the link in the description. Check out gohighlevel.com, link in the description, 30-day free trial. Now back to today's pod. Dig it. So something that you said there was super interesting, and I just want to highlight it because it's a unique perspective, and sometimes you change your perspective, you change your approach, and I feel like maybe this is something is in terms of approach that you carried through, but you didn't want to take away the opportunity from somebody else who would potentially have been a better fit, which
Mm,
is like a very altruistic to a certain extent mindset to take, and in doing so, you found yourself in this problem of, I need a role that's a good fit for me, and you decided to just go create one.
mhm,
And that was the inception of the business in the very beginning. You brought in a couple of, a buddy, and then you ultimately pieced together a team of four to be able
mm.
to start this endeavor off. How did you focus, or where did you find focus in terms of getting to business? Like, where was the first dollar, in a sense, made?
So we got really lucky. The friend from growing up who brought in his friend from college, his name was Ben. And Ben and Vlad, who was his friend, they had a professor at school who actually had his own agency. And they didn't do digital. And you asked, I'm now realizing I did not answer in your first question, like what was the problem we were trying to solve? 2011, social was not net, it's net new in the lifespan of human history, but it was not net new at that point. It had been around for a number of years in the incarnation we had at that point. But how marketing agencies were tackling it, how businesses were tackling it, it was still, as it is today, very much a Wild West. And what we saw was a lot of these existing companies trying to back into digital. And we said, well, what if we just try to emerge organically from it? Like, we are the people who kind of grew up in this generation where, yeah, we played with Legos and Lincoln Logs, but we were also children for the rise of PlayStation and Super Nintendo and all these other things and the internet. So that was kind of the opportunity we saw. This agency said, we don't have anyone who does this work. We can give you free office space, and then maybe we'll bring you in on some pitches now and then. So our first few dollars were, I think we ended up doing one or two collaborative projects with them. We redid the website for this marketing agency, and we ultimately kind of partnered with them for about a year and a half before stepping out to our own space. But that was how we got our first few dollars for projects as a whole. And then in terms of what we drummed up after that, that is like, okay, how do we cold call or get our own business? A lot of it was referrals and relationships. It was doing social media for the place where one of us had a summer internship or a job during college. It was joining the local chamber of commerce and finding the person who ran a cookie delivery business from home and doing their website and social media. That was a lot of what our first projects were, and we just pounded the pavement, right? Most people who start a marketing agency, they either come with a portfolio or they come with relationships. We're fresh out of college. We didn't have either of those things.
Mm.
So we really had to pound the pavement to get this done. So we did from traditional to, avant-garde to cutting edge. Any method of trying to acquire a business is what we were doing. And ultimately, the tipping point for us was we brought in some of our friends who were between jobs or like taking time off before going to grad school to have like interns and do a little bit of work for us that we needed. And one of them went on to do an internship at a fashion PR house after being with us. And one of the partners at this PR house went to the dog park in Brooklyn. And at the dog park, she befriended this woman who did marketing at a publishing house. And she said, we have this book that I know could be good, but we need a team that does digital. Do you know anyone? And so through that series of connections, ended up getting a referral. And that for us was like basically the project that put us on the map and kind of sealed our trajectory to being able to find something sustainable and successful as an agency.
Wow, talk about a story and talk about how stars kind of align and things collide, but everything starts somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. It's almost like you did like a incubator of sorts. So,
Mm,
a professor was running an agency and then afforded the opportunity to have a place to work and then some initial kind of inception of clients and experience to be able to come out almost like a Y Combinator for media to a certain extent, which is
mm-hmm.
cool. And then you're spitting out of that and it's essentially make it work, which yeah, reality is most businesses in America today, 35 million small businesses, only a third of them are going to do what you did, which is survive 10 years.
Mm.
So you definitely figured out how to make it work. And it's funny how relationships matter because you're kind of shaking the trees, doing it whatever you can to find those initial clients.
Absolutely.
And it's like word of mouth at the dog park to this to that, and then it connects. And then you
Mhm.
found this thing, and this thing became very real. What was the name of that project? Do you remember? Like the very first one? I'm
The
sure you did.
first, yes. So the book that put us on the map, and yes, I know this well because this is a huge project for us, and I led that, was a book called Grain Brain by Dr. David Perlmutter. And it would be not what it was not just successful; it was the New York Times most successful nonfiction book of 2013. So this, like, really, the social media campaign we did for that really kind of knocked it out of the park. You know, I believe, the CEO or the head of the president of the publishing house said, like, it was digital was the reason this book was so successful.
Yeah, which is interesting because it's like taking a print to a digital and the connectivity between the two worlds.
Mm.
And this ultimately, did this become the pattern recognition of we've we took some time to figure out what works, and then we identify, and then it's just a function of more, and then more of the thing
We
that's
Yeah,
going?
yeah, we absolutely became known in publishing circles and in health and wellness circles as, like, the people you go to for a book launch. That was easily at least half of our book of business at any particular point in time, if not more. Because it was, again, it's niche. People start to know you for a thing, and that's what, time and time again. We probably did, by the time we sold, we probably did 100 book launches in total, if
What
I had
goes
to put
into a
a number to it.
successful book launch?
The problem with that question is that it changes every 6 months, right? So I always say working with Dr. Perlmutter is a great example for that, because the first book we did for him in 2013, 2012, 2013,
Mm.
2013, at that point in time, right, a good Facebook post would go out to 500% of your audience. It would get served out. Right now, a good post, you're happy when you hit 10% reach or 20% reach. We were getting 500%, right? This was a totally different time versus the next time we did a book for him. Okay, that's when Instagram was really blowing up as a business opportunity. And then the next book was, let's start to move back towards email. And then the next book was podcast appearances. So it's constantly, constantly changing. And I don't think there's necessarily a true North Star anymore. I would say if there's anything, it's that you've built a successful audience around the messenger, not the message, because you want to be able to take people from project to project to project, not sell them in on a single title, and then never be able to carry them over to the next thing. So I think that's like the big mindset approach, because what you used to see is, like, it'd be the same thing with, like, films, right? They always want to make an Instagram account for the movie, or they want to make a Twitter account for the book. And I was like, why are you building up something new every time? You want to just build something for this person, and then they can continuously use themselves as the marketing engine for it.
Wow, so messenger, not the message, and then driving continuity of that message from the the messenger
Absolutely.
consistently over time and
Yeah.
compounding that. And essentially, it sounds like, yeah, it's where the awareness is where things kind of, when you're trying to connect that continuity tied to things.
Mm,
Dig it. So in terms of going from that initial client to then the concept of where you're focusing, which is the book launch, you said
mm,
50% of the book of business. What about the other 50%? And then how did you kind of land and expand in terms of the
mhm.
agency?
So listen, I think 90% of our business was referral based, if not more than that. Once you do a good job and once you become known for something, people just keep talking about you and speaking your names, and you get a reputation not just for what you deliver, but for how you go about delivering it. And I think the experience of working with us was always a joy for people. So that other 50% of what we did probably divides up evenly across tourism and entertainment, and then a mishmash. Like, it's probably 25% tourism and entertainment, 24% a bunch of random stuff that we did. And that's because our business kind of broke up in two ways. We had, like, organic social campaigns, where books and health and wellness became the big piece of it. And then we had, like, our digital development agency, so, like, mobile apps, website design and dev, et cetera. And within that, we were a little bit more agnostic about what we did. Some of the big kind of projects in that universe, because I mentioned entertainment too. So we did social media for a division of the NFL for about 6 years. But that was a project we got through a connection of mine from college, right? It's all about the network and who knows you. And there was an opportunity and they brought us in. But some of the other work we did, we did the official mobile app for the state of New York. We did, like, a welcome center experience for New York across 12 of their different institutions. But then we did, websites for organizations as diverse as Wines from Spain to, Tusk Ventures, Bradley Tusk is a well-known kind of like VC and thinker in New York circle and policy circles. We did, websites. I'm trying to think what else we did. It's been so long since I've kind of gone through the list of them in my head.
Yeah, no,
But it
but
was
it,
kind
it
of it was kind of all
ultimately all
over the
trends to
place.
the same place, which is running and
Relationship.
operating a
Yeah.
very successful agency for an extended period of time, which again,
Mm,
most folks will never have the privilege to be able to do. You
mm,
did, you navigated it, you're doing it again today. So you figured out something very special. And I'm hoping to
mm,
extract from this episode maybe a couple of those bits of special sauce in terms of the
mhm,
recipe of
mhm,
the successful business that can go on and ultimately exit.
mm,
Maybe the place to focus would be constraints. So things that you've
mhm.
learned in terms of lessons. What's the anxiety drivers? What's the things that are the red flags of running and building a
I do
successful
not have enough
agency?
time to tell you about all my anxiety drivers. That's what I pay a therapist for. But I will tell you, I guess so. The question is like, what are some of the pain points
Yeah, what to
or
avoid?
definitely? Yeah. Listen, I think there's a lot to avoid. I think the first one that really comes to mind for me is not having an idea for the end in mind. And that, I'm not saying you necessarily have to have that from day one, but at some point you have to sit down and have that conversation with yourself. What do I want it to look like when this chapter closes?
Mm,
Is it the end of a chapter? Is it the end of a book? Is it ever going to end? Do I seeing this through to the finish? I think at a certain point you have to have a realistic conversation with yourself about that, to think about everything from what that looks like to the timeline for that to what do I have to put in place to make that happen. And I know I am not the first person to say that, right? I think you talk to anyone who you've spoken to on this podcast and anyone else who's not on this podcast who started and finished a business, having a vision for that end is incredibly important. And if you didn't have it, you wish you did.
mhm,
So that's definitely one that I would pinpoint there. I said this early on. We had way too many partners. Four is way too many, and it's not a reflection on any of us individually. It's simply unsustainable. There's no country in the world that has four presidents, right? It's just unsustainable to build something that way. It's not unheard of to have a co-CEO, right? Sometimes you'll see two people, or there's the division between the president and the chairman of the board and the CEO, and that's got its own manifestations and reasons for existing. But the problem with just having four people was that it's too many financially. It's way too many mouths to feed, right? Because we're all going to take a salary that's about the same amount, and it's going to be substantial. And then beyond that, even though we tried our best to divide and conquer like zones of expertise and say,
mhm,
okay, well, I run the P&L and making the numbers work, and you run the tech division, and you run people operations, and you run this. Everybody's got an opinion. And
mhm.
when you're under 30 years old, as we were for much of the time, not only did we have opinions, we were still a little bit stubborn.
Yeah, you're learning
And
what to shape them. Yeah.
exactly. And also, I'm still a little bit stubborn at 36. But at that point in time, it just, we butted heads a lot more than we needed to. And it was really, it slowed us down from getting where we could have been. So I think that was a real problem. And it gave us a constraint when it came time to exit, because we now were considering, when it was time for us to exit, we had two approaches. We either sell or we cut back on what we do and then we try to rebuild, right? So we cut some clients, we cut some people, we scale back, and then that could kind of unlock going from 2 million to 20 million. But because we had four people who were these, again, expensive mouths to feed, turning 30 years old, that kind of option was not on the table. So it really limited what we could do when it came time to exit. Would that have been a problem if we had known that that was the case from the beginning? Maybe not, but it definitely impacted us. So those are kind of two key pieces. And I would say the third one is like, nothing is ever beneath you. And I think we would not have been successful if we were not willing to put ourselves in weird situations, random places, boring rooms, all those things, right? Like,
Mhm.
listen, eventually we all hit a point where we can't put our time into 100% of the things we want to do. But when you're just trying to get started, like, I don't know, you can't have airs about you, right? There's no organization that is too small. There's no coffee that's not worthwhile, because you never know where those connections are going to lead. And again, 90% of our business was referral based, and it wasn't referrals just from existing clients. It was from people we met along the way that we were trying to do stuff with,
Including dog parks.
including doctors. Exactly. Like, kids, when I used to lecture at universities, the kids would always ask, like, what is the, how did you get clients, things like that. And I'm like, it was luck. Like, that was pure luck. But we worked our asses off to put ourselves in a position to make luck happen to us. And I think a last thing I would say is that I don't like tradition, but I understand why tradition exists. And so I'm always thinking about how can I modernize tradition, right? And the example I will give you is the holiday card. I think it's a lot of things that probably most business owners today are not thinking about. And most people of probably below my generation are just like, why would you even do that? And I bring this example up because I think we took it and said, there's a reason we do this. And we're also a service-based business, right? So if you're running a goods-based business or a product-based business, that's a little bit different. But in a service-based business, it's all about the nurturing of the relationship. And within that, we always were trying to say, like, how do we stay top of mind and how do we make people feel valued and how do we do it differently? So, like, we always took our holiday card really seriously because we said it's a great opportunity to showcase what we do and to make people feel good about it. So, like, over the years, we did one of our holiday cards was we included a postcard that people could fill out and send to nursing homes in Texas after Hurricane, I forget which hurricane that was, Hurricane Harvey. And like the big thing was like a lot of people were either stuck in nursing homes or getting moved around and they weren't going to be able to spend the holidays with anyone. So we were like, okay, send a message. Like, you can send a message to people. So we did that. One year, the case was literally like, we would work so hard, we literally give you the shirt off our backs. And we all of our partners threw a shirt in, we cut them up, we attached a little card to it like you would get at a museum. And it was like whose shirt it was, where it's from, why it matters to them, etc. It's like we're literally giving it to you. And these stunts are so silly. But if they convert one or two clients, they're absolutely worthwhile and they make it happen. And it's a thing that to this day, once in a blue moon, somebody who got that will still talk to me about it. Because they'll be like, it was so funny. Or I was like, I never looked at it again, but I was throwing this out and I found it and I thought about how great that was. And it's like, it's just a great way to kind of keep yourself top of mind.
Leave a
And I
memory.
would say,
Yeah.
yeah, and I know I've been monologuing here and I'll say one more piece and then pause because I'm sure it brought up a couple questions. But I think one other thing that we learned along the way, and I believe this was a piece of advice that somebody gave one of my partners, was like, there's a triangle, and this triangle has 3 points, and you can do great work at one of the points. You can be great people at point number 2 and be a pleasure to work with, or you can deliver your work on time at point number 3. You can do any 2 of those things. If you try to do all 3 of them, you will fail. It's just impossible to balance all of those. So pick what your 2 are and be the best at those. And I think we also just eventually realized we're going to be great people. We're going to do great work. We're never going to be on time. And we probably very rarely worked. But I think I definitely had a lot of anxiety about that because I'm very like regimented and I care a lot about like making a promise and fulfilling on that, especially being the lead on client services, right? You're the first person who gets the questions, like why you said you were going to have it this day and you didn't. But eventually we just kind of had to realize like, this is what we're good at and we're going to own that. And eventually we're going to have to figure out how do we make that value proposition clear to people. We are not the urgent team. We are the important team. We are the effective team, but we're not the urgent team.
No, I love this. So many things for us to dive deep into here. So very quickly, I'm starting to see this podcast and this episode specifically take shape. So the concept was exited so that we could speak to exited founders and really learn from the lessons of what made a business that was capable of exiting. And you're in an agency business, you're in a service business, and is the definition of a business that many bootstrappers will start with. So you have ownership of the vast majority of our audience listening, and they're sitting here listening like, hey, let me get this masterclass in terms of how to build a successful agency business. And you just dropped and shared quite a few things. One of the first things, though, that you said was have that end destination in mind, almost like the goal line to a certain extent. See the vision, where you want to go so that you can make good, timely decisions to get there. And you had said a couple of lines in that if you saw it differently at the beginning, you could have approached it differently, where you were in terms of the shape and time of the exit. You had this decision of potentially pulling back or advancing forward, the ability to go from where you were to 20 million, couple million to 20 million and approaching it slightly different. I wanted to pause there first because that's like going to change your perspective, change your approach type of conversation. And there may be a few members of the audience listening right now saying, hey, let me have that perspective. What's that approach again? So what did you mean by that in terms of taking a step back? I think you even mentioned, I don't know if you said fire a few clients or potentially.
Yeah. So when we were looking to be done, so what basically happened was we had a forcing function. We were all at our wits' end of each other. It was also we were all turning 30, so we're having this quarter life, third life crisis. And one of our partners was basically like, I got to get out. And I give him a lot of credit for that because I think we were all feeling it, but he was the first one to vocalize it. And that became a forcing function of like, okay, we're on the clock. It's time to figure out what we're going to do. And so at that moment, at that juncture, we were like, okay, there's 3 options. or there's four options. One is we just shut it down. Goodbye. We get nothing for it. It was a lovely journey. See you on the other side. Option two is we sell. Obviously, was what we ended up doing. Option three was we turn it over to our staff and let them try to run it. We maintain some type of equity and we get a residual from it.
Mm-hmm.
And then option four was we scale back. We somehow buy out. So this could take a lot of different forms, but the basic idea was scale back, cut the clients, cut the book of business, think about our service offering differently, focus in on that, and then try to accelerate growth by being a very specific type of agency, different from the generalists that we currently were.
Mm.
That there's again, within that, there's like 10 different ways that could have looked, but that was a general bucket that we were considering too. But part of the problem was that, again, with having four partners, four mouths to feed, four ideas, some of these options were much more difficult to pull off than simply existing, right? If we're going to buy someone out, if we're going to turn it over to staff, getting, 20% of a residual versus 5% of a residual is a really big difference.
Mm-hmm.
Needing to give somebody $150,000 to buy them out when we have not made as much money as individuals for the first half of the business as we wanted because we were four people taking an executive salary is a big deal. So that really constrained some of the options we were thinking about when we were reaching that point. And then additionally, with our staff, we didn't I love them to death, and I'm so proud of the team we had. We did not prepare them well to take over the business if that's what we had wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not their fault. We just didn't build the organization in such a way that we were training people to do that. I think we built a great environment. One of the things I'm proudest of in my career is our retention was incredibly high. I think we only ever had two people quit, and one of those people came back, and the
Wow.
other left for another job in the industry she was always meant to be in. Other than that, anyone who left we parted ways, or we had fired them because they weren't just a good fit. So I know we had a good ecosystem, but we didn't train talent for running what we were doing. We trained them to be good in the role and to have the potential to continue to grow in their own careers, not to run digital natives.
How beautifully said. In a quick breakdown, rundown: shut down, sell, operational exit, or restructure is the four
Mm-hmm.
that we just reviewed. And a big component of that decision is that second point that you made earlier. So first was cast the vision of the exit. Second was too many cooks in the kitchen. Make sure you're taking on the right number of folks on that founding team, which then we just learned was the catalyst for the exit. And that was one of my questions: the inception of the exit. Where did it come from? How far along into that journey of the 10 years when that moment in time happened of let's make a decision?
It was like Q3 2019, I think.
Okay, so
Yeah,
okay,
when he
so
was
like
like, "It's time."
realistically, you made the decision, and then it was a couple of years to retool to be able to get to the exit that
Yeah,
you eventually approached in 2021.
yeah. So if I remember correctly, I want to say that he said it in May 2019 or June or July. Like again, it was Q2, Q3. I forget exactly.
No,
We
I
needed a
mean,
couple.
yeah, it's all
Yeah,
relative.
we needed a couple months to be like, okay, well, what do we do? Eventually said we're going to hire an M&A consultant or expert for this because we just don't have the bandwidth to do it. Then it was a few months of working with him to get all our ducks in a row. And then I think we opened up kind of the data center and sent out like notice that we were on the market in late December, early January 2020. And we actually had a deal on the table, and then COVID. And I distinctly remember I was on vacation in Montana, and I had to step outside the coffee shop because I got a call from this other agency owner, and they were like, "We love you guys, but we got to put it on hold until we see what happens with this pandemic,
Mhm.
some pandemic." We were obviously then just totally on hold. It was a weird time for us because our business actually did exception as many digital first businesses did. We actually all did really well during COVID
Yeah,
financially,
everything went
which
virtual.
is exactly, it's a weird thing to say. It's an uncomfortable thing to say, but it is the truth of our financial situation. We had a very good 2020. We tried to pay that back to our communities as best we could through charity and other stuff. But that
Mhm.
was the reality for us. And then that summer of 2020, that same buyer tried to re-engage us. So we came back, that fell through. But then in Jan or Feb 21, first buyer started. That's when Accelerate 360 and the other buyer came through. And then it just took us about 5 or 6 months to close the deal.
Did that happen organically? Did they come in organically, or was it still outbound and you were working a process and creating a process, getting multiple buyers involved? Or
They bit on some of the work that our M&A consultant was doing. So they kind of came in through that.
Gotcha. Can you take us through that moment in time? So this concept of, which is a very unique conversation for us because you essentially had a hard conversation internally as partners,
Mhm,
and it was a let's make a good timely decision. You did make the decision, and then you actually created the exit
mhm.
opportunity. You went out and you got professional support to be able to achieve that. What were the things that they covered with you?
I think the biggest thing for us was that he was able to make a forcing function and do the work that we couldn't do. Part of that timeline between my partner saying in May-ish, I want to be out, and when we hired this guy, I think in maybe September, October, was we were like, okay, let's try to sell it ourselves and see if we can do it. So, we can save some money that way. We don't have to pay a fee or anything. And we were having no success with it at all. So
Mhm.
it became very clear we needed someone to do it for us. And we also partially didn't know how to tell that story. Where we were struggling was to say, okay, well, how do we put it out there that we're for sale? What do we tell our people? How do we make sure we're doing this in a way that we're not also going to create fear and drive people out as we're trying to sell this? We didn't know what documents to put together. We didn't know any of that kind of stuff. So it was just totally a foreign concept to us. So it became clear we needed that. And I think Gary Kane, who's the guy that we worked with, he was great at kind of giving us the structure, which is what I think we most needed. And then he knew where to go out and tell the story. Listen, we're selling a service-based business. This is not the exit that people dream about when they think about becoming an entrepreneur and then going to buy an island in the Caribbean and never be seen from again. This is a nice exit, but that's all. That's it. You're still going to be working at some point in the future. So we knew we didn't know how to do that, right? When you have a cool product, it's easy to start thinking about, okay, well, here are 6 different companies that might want to buy this to make it a part of what they do. For us, it's like, okay, are we just selling to another agency? And if we do, that's going to be an aqua hire, and that might not be what we want.
Mhm.
And we also didn't have a lot of, we had connections with other agencies like us. We didn't have connections to the bigger ones that might want to buy us. So we knew we needed someone who could figure out where to put us and how to position us for all of them. And he really helped us do that.
Dig it. And for folks listening, because I'm sure there's a number of folks in the audience right now that may be very close to this moment in time. Maybe it's conversations that they've already had with their team. Maybe it's something that they're already pursuing. What you're saying is it's definitely worth it to go out and get the help. In getting the help,
Hmm.
there's a whole process and a procedure and an approach that you can methodically be able to take, and it
Hmm.
supports you to be able to develop that demand in the market. And realistically going through the process though, then we had COVID, right? Something
Yeah.
a crazy moment in time happened. So you had entered into it, you had a conversation, that then happens, it kind of breaks it up. So you already got acclimated to it, you did a lot of the blocking and the tackling. And then post COVID, then you got a couple of buyers that came in and you're in a full process. How long did that process take for you guys?
From when we started engaging with Accelerate 360.
Yeah.
So I believe I first spoke to Brian, who was the CMO over there. I think it was either January or February of 2021. And so from the day that we had that first conversation, let's say Jan Feb, we officially sold the business June 30th and started at Accelerate 360 July 1st. So
Okay.
it was
So
about 6 months, 5
6 months.
to 6
Yeah.
months.
That's
Yeah, yeah.
about that feels about right. And in that 5 to 6 month period, you're now navigating the actual nuances of the deal getting done.
Hmm.
If you can reflect back to that moment in time, like what were talk about anxiety drivers? What were the what were those anxiety drivers and what were all the feels of that 6 months?
Well, one is you're kind of like, could this fall apart again because of COVID? There was definitely some fear, like, are we going to get this far down the rabbit hole? And then that happened. One is just the general anxiety of it's a big change, right? What is this new thing going to be like for me? Number three was how's the staff going to react? Are they going to stay through? Are they going to be a part of this? Number four was what about clients? Are they willing to be a part of this, continue on? And then I think the biggest pieces that I was really worried about were, I think, what is this culture of this new organization going to be like, and how do I adapt and adjust to that, and what is that shape going to look like, and what parts of any of myself and my beliefs will be compromised because of this. And obviously, the goal when you sell is that that's not going to happen, but I was selling to a CMO who I really liked and I trusted and I felt trusted by. And so I was optimistic that everything we were going to do was going to be in alignment, but also I was stepping into an equation with fog of war, right? This wasn't me being purchased by BBDO, where we all in the industry kind of know what BBDO is and we might know what they stand for. And we can talk to people who've worked there before. This was a new company being put together by new money. And all I had was the trust and the word of an executive who I trusted, but who knows what's going to happen and the alchemy of other companies come in. So there was a lot to do with that. And then I just think the general fear of a big frickin' change and who knows what that's going to mean for me.
Yeah, especially after a decade of doing something that you've
Hmm.
built,
Hmm.
literally coming out of school, creating your own job, and ultimately a career that then became a
Mm.
company that then you got to this moment in time and its continuity of exit. And it seems like that's what the primary concern was. It's continuity with existing team, it was continuity with
Mm.
existing customers, and then it was continuity into this transitional change, which the deal itself was unique because it feels like it was almost like a private equity-esque type of structure. But can we
Mhm.
talk about that? And can we talk about the experience of coming into essentially something being put together on the other side of the table?
Yeah. So, I mean, you talk about private equity because it was Accelerate 360 was a company owned by private equity. They had a logistics arm, they had a media arm. They were pretty much like, we could build companies from scratch. We really just need a marketing and branding engine. So the idea was to put together what they called the brand highway, where they were going to acquire the agencies they needed to make that happen and put those companies together inside the brand highway and develop a marketing flywheel. So we were this digital arm. There was a brand and creative arm coming in. There was like an insights and strategy group coming in. And then there were a few existing marketing people. They were going to weave us all together. And it was like, boom, we can now launch products like crazy because we have everything we need. So we were the first acquisition of the three different firms.
Mm.
There was us, then the other agency came in. The second agency came in about a month later, and then the last one came in at the end of the year, maybe beginning of the following. And it was kind of, where we struggled was things didn't really change actually off the bat, right? They still kind of gave me a lot of autonomy. I was able to run my team as I wanted. They were a teams based company, but I was like Slack or die. We're not switching to Microsoft. I'm not using it, and they let me do that. It was totally fine. He gave me a lot of trust and autonomy, which I really really appreciated. He made it a very seamless transition in that way, and he was for me a really good leader. I do think where some of the conflicts really emerged was in issues around culture. That was the biggest problem, and it wasn't things that were glaring, but it was. Let me step back. I think culture was a big one. There's two. Culture was a big one. There were not things that were downright difficult and combative, but it was clear where our priorities differed. And it was going to make it, I think, if we continued and we're doing this for like 5 years, I think we would have had a lot more flare ups than we actually did. And I regret if I had known now what I knew then, I would have made it a much bigger part of what I tried to bite off initially, rather than sitting in the back seat with it. So that was kind of problem number one. And the second problem that I would kind of ID there is nobody did a good enough job integrating all of us, and I think that's part of the fact because partly due to the fact that we were still being brought together before they stopped what we were doing in Q2 of 21. So we very rarely kind of had cross-functional collaboration across the teams because there was no business we had all won collectively yet, or if there
Mm.
was, it was only like a small piece of the operation and it hadn't made it from company one to company two.
Mm.
And we didn't know how to bring each other into what we were already doing because these were existing clients, right? We had our relationships, we had our people, we had our systems, we had our flow. So again, by the time they shut us down, we had finally figured out, okay, here's our structure, here's our system, here's the inflow, here's who's going to report to who and do all these things. But we didn't get a chance to really test that out and live in that universe before we were all done.
Yeah, no. So many things that I think are so valuable here. I mean, statistically speaking, most folks don't exit. So we said less than 7% exit. That's because the vast majority of folks that try to exit, 70, 80% that
Mm.
attempt never will. And on the backside of the ones that do, oftentimes the place in which a lot of deals fall apart post acquisition on the integration. That
Mm.
integration is what kills ultimately a lot of deals. And that's what we're hearing here. And it's an approach. In this situation, it's unique because there was essentially a couple of several different SMEs
Mhm.
that were very specialized in a very specific function that were ultimately brought together to ultimately create this brand highway in a
Mm,
sense, this marketing flywheel for this
right.
private equity firm. And that created a lot of cooks in the kitchen again, to a certain extent, and less so in terms of integration and the functional, like the functional support to be able to execute in. I think it's also interesting that, yeah, you flagged that, like, we didn't close the business. We're kind of figuring out how to hand it off. The touch points of all of this is interesting in terms of
Mm,
uniqueness. Um, yeah, so many. I feel like there's so many things that you experience that are case studies that a lot of folks could potentially learn from on one side of the
mm,
table, on the buy side of the table, and then also
right.
hindsight on the sell side going into it. Would you do it again? Is it a deal that you would do? Would you approach it differently? What lessons would you, if you're in that
Yeah.
seat?
I would 100% do it again. And I've had a lot of time to think about that because, it's the first question everyone asks, right? I didn't leave my business and it's still there growing. I thought I was leaving, it was going to be the end of a chapter. Well, it turned out to be the end of the book, right? I can put it up on the shelf, I can look at it whenever I want, but the whole thing is gone. And so, yeah, so the question that you just asked me is one I get often, would I do it again? And 100% yes, because I had my scorecard for a deal and this checked every single box and no other opportunity did that. And I also know that I have to, when you sell, when you sign on that dotted line, you are signing away the future and you need to be comfortable with that. No matter what promise, unless it's contractually worked into the deal, whatever promises were made to you, whatever obligations were stated, unless it is in that paperwork that you sign, good luck, buddy. Like there's no guarantee that that stuff is going to happen, right? So I'm giving it over to you and I need to detach myself from the emotions of how I feel about what's happening because I no longer have control. I am ceding that authority. And sure, you can be upset about how something feels, but I can't let that jade it because even if another deal said if someone came to me today and said all those things that you didn't like that they did, don't worry about it. Like, let's go back in time. I have a time machine. Sell to me instead. No, because I don't know what other things they're going to do. That could be a problem, right?
Yeah.
We have no ability to predict the future. And the other piece, like I said, is I kind of had the scorecard and I said, this is the only deal that checks all the boxes. I knew what I needed out of a deal. I wanted a senior level role. I wanted opportunities for growth and development. I wanted mentorship and I wanted to have a place where I could retain as much of my clients and my team as possible. And they offered me 100% on both sides of that. And they gave us 80% cash up front. How could I not take this deal? There's no better opportunity unless someone was going to offer me $10 million. That's the only way
Yeah,
any
totally
offer could have
different
been better.
deal, which
Yeah.
is so
Like that's the
valuable
only
to
way a
hear
deal could
for
have been
folks
better.
at home because it's like
Yeah.
asking that question in the hindsight and then you giving that affirmative answer in the way and the manner
Mm,
in which you did, I think is extremely valuable because it's like you can control your process, but you can't guarantee your outcomes. And
right.
as is with life and business in general, and in this situation, you controlled your process. You had your buy box and you
Hmm.
went through the process and you did the things that you need to be able to do. And the things that were out of your control is just the reality of the situation that is life. But in
Right.
terms of do it again, I guess there's also an underlining answer of the fact outside of the deal, you would do it again because you are. So on the backside of this experience, you are quite literally going about it again today
Mm,
with Loudmouth. And I was hoping that in terms of the opportunity to close this off, because you've
mm,
invested tremendous amount of time into us today, sharing live learned experience, things that folks don't oftentimes talk about, let alone get to hear or listen to,
mm,
like our audience today. I just wanted to kind of get into that transitionary stage of post exit, what life is
mm.
like, what life has been like, and where you're living today, having now done it.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, I definitely, like the good Jew that I am, I wandered the desert for a long time before figuring out where I wanted to end up. I did not want to go back to starting an agency again. I looked really hard at finding a job first, and it was really tough because, quite frankly, nobody wants to hire an entrepreneur, right? They think you're going to come in for a little bit and you're going to leave, or you're going to be difficult to work with, you're going to be sandpaper. And my problem with that is one, I don't shy away from that. I call myself marketing sandpaper. I always say working with me will not be a frictionless experience, but you will emerge more polished for having done it. Because I'm not afraid to say no, I'm not afraid to push back, and I will never compromise that part of myself for a dollar of revenue. So that's kind of part one. But part two is I really did want to be somewhere, right? What I really wanted out of that deal was looking at my stage in life and saying, I've had an amazing 10 years. I've never worked for anyone. I've never seen another way of doing something. I've only ever done it the way we did it at Digital Natives. And wouldn't it be cool to get inside the house somewhere else and see how they're doing it? And what could
Mhm.
I learn should I choose to do this again? I really did want to work somewhere. Unfortunately, that was just not coming to fruition. I had a lot of conversations that didn't go anywhere, and most of the offers I were getting were startups, and I didn't really want to do marketing at a startup because I didn't want to work that hard again. It was a lot of work. So eventually I started consulting again, and then I started getting some more work. I started needing somebody to help me with that. I reached out to a colleague of mine who I knew from then Twitter, RIP, who had always wanted to work with me, and we decided to start working together a little bit. He had been goading me into wanting to doing an agency for a long time, and eventually I just kind of said to him, listen, I will do it, but if we're doing it, like, we'll be partners and we'll be collaborative, whatever. I was like, but these are my red lines. Like, I will not compromise on doing this my way. I have seen so much in how this industry operates in my 10 years as an agency leader, my, at that point, 3 or 4 years working as an independent consultant. Like, I am not compromising on these factors. And also, this is all I'm building. I told him from the outset, I am not trying to grow this business beyond $500,000 a year in revenue. That is all I want. That's all I need to sustain an operation and my lifestyle. I am not looking to make this my whole life again, like I did for 10 years. I missed out on a lot. I lost a lot of hair. I stressed way too much. And I do not want to do that again. I am emotionally connected to this business in a very different way because I have so much more clarity on what I want it to be in my life than I did before. And I also am doing a lot of other things outside of this that are filling my time. So it's allowing me to have a much healthier relationship to it than I did the first time around when it was, my sun, my moon, and my stars.
Yeah, talk about a valuable conversation. A lot of folks listening right now probably should rewind the past minute and hear it back again and again and again, because you don't know what you don't know until you know it. And getting
Hmm.
started, folks don't know. And oftentimes the goal becomes optimization for that 20 million from the 2 to 20, you know.
Yeah.
And reality is what you learned in the experience is we have a lifestyle business to really support our life,
Hmm.
and you're building and optimizing a business to be able to achieve that, it sounds like. And through that
Yeah.
live learn
I really have.
experience, you kind of know how, which is a
Yeah.
super
No,
powerful thing.
100%. Yeah. And I think that's, if I could give one piece, I mean, I've hopefully shared things that are useful, but if there's one piece of advice I could give someone, it's like, understand what you need out of your business. And by that, like I said, I have figured out what kind of a lifestyle I'm trying to live. And some of that comes with the benefit of age, where I know how much money I need to live that life. And I do not, what is the point of chasing another $100,000 in revenue for my business if it's not going to improve my life in a way that I need just to have that money? I came to a point where I said, I have everything I want in life. All I need to do is be able to get the new version of that thing when I need it, right? When I log enough miles on my sneakers, I got to get a new pair. When my iPhone breaks, when I need to do a car repair, like, I want to be able to afford that stuff. But at this stage of my life, I used to be a big watch guy, but a Shinola and a Rolex tell time the same way. And one of them affords me the opportunity to have a lot more time to enjoy it than the other. And I'm not interested in, I still appreciate a Rolex, but I don't think I would ever try to buy one. And it's not about whether or not I can afford it. It's just because I don't want to work hard. I don't want to work to have to get it. And if I had that money, I'd probably do something else with it. I'd probably give it away, or I'd probably invest it, or I'd probably donate it, or start another business. Like, it's just, I know my priorities now. And because of that, I can have a much healthier relationship to what I'm building and doing.
Which is such a powerful place to build from. And I'm hoping that there was factually a tremendous amount of value dropped in this episode. So first and foremost, thank you for investing the time here with the audience today
Of
to
course.
be able to share that. And in terms of the folks listening at home, if maybe some of them do want to perhaps get in touch, or if there's maybe an ask or a trade of goodwill for the time and the value in which you've created, what would that be?
Yeah, well, please feel free to find me, jonathanjacobs.com, or on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, where I'm most active. I'm happy to answer other questions that this may have brought up, or be an advisor if necessary. And feel free to reach out. I'm happy to chat. I love having conversations about this. No one has reached out to me in a couple of years now to do a discussion about the exit process itself. Did a few interviews right after it happened, but it's been a bit since. So it was nice to take a little bit of a walk down memory lane today.
Very good. Jonathan Jacobs, appreciate you for joining us. Till next time, trust the process, commit to the journey. Bootstrap to billions.
If I could do it all again.
Struggling business? It's time to exit with ownership. Join the Exit Studio. Build equity. Unlock capital. Exit with ownership. Keep it simple.
I feel nauseous, believe me. Never had a lot of shit come easy. Had to work hard, struggle just to be me. Had to rise up just so they could see me. Did what I had to do just to feed me. And what was left over I put towards my dreaming. But the only thing in life that has meaning are the things you gotta work for, believe me. Take into your hands a plan. Your own hands can land your own brand. And damn, I feel like no one takes accountability. They want the credibility, convincingly unwilling to put in the hours it takes to get some power. Don't be fucking sour. Take a cold shower. Scream until you're louder. Work until you're prouder. And all the doubters.
You gotta have that grit, that hustle to make it in this city. Never give up.